Welcome to whatever it is we're calling it, starring Paul Lorello and my lovely and talented friend, Alec Chambers.
Hello.
Cheers to you. Cheers to everybody.
Cheers.
This is our thing. We're pairing a drink with a story, and a short horror story, to be precise. The original title I had for this, and I had told you that it was the Short Horror Beer Cast. By the time this airs, maybe that will be the title, maybe not. We'll see.
It's a good title.
It's not bad. It was the one I hated the most, so I used it. So I went on the Monty Python thing. Apparently, Monty Python's Flying Circus was the name everybody hated, so they went with it. They figured
that's the one.
That's the one. So what do you got? What do you got in the glass?
Well, what I wanted to get was the Harrow's Supreme Lager from
That's right.
the story, which if it was real, I would probably get it.
Exactly.
But, I ended up going with what was in the fridge, which is a little lame.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's all right.
Because what I was going to do was have a Grey Goose and
Oh, nice.
but I thought that was a little hoity-toity for what we were talking about. So I have what's called Dirty Bastard from Founders Brewery in Michigan. Scotch-style ale. It's pretty heavy.
So the heaviness is good for horror.
Always.
All right. I went a slightly different route with my planning here. So I was thinking I had 4 criteria. I wanted it to be beer. Okay. This will become very evident once we get into the story why we're choosing beer. Also evident, it had to be in a can. It had to be mass produced and cheap. And it had to possibly be from New England. Okay. Very good. Because the story is by Stephen King. And Stephen King is from Maine. He sets everything in Maine. I figured Maine would be a great, actually there's some good beer that comes out of Maine. However, I can't find any where I live. So the closest I could find, I said, you know what? I've seen Narragansett beer around. Narragansett lagers is in stores around me. So I said, I'll pick up a Narragansett. It's cool. It's a New England beer. It's what Quint was drinking in Jaws when he crushes the can. And I've had it, and it's not bad. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's great. It's a a workaday beer. So
a lawnmower beer.
Yeah. So no, exactly. So I was looking all over the place. All of a sudden, nobody has Narragansett. Nowhere. When I need it, nobody has it. I looked up. There was a place about 10 miles away in the bail bond and pawn shop section of town, and I drove there, and they didn't have it either. So I said, screw it. I just looked up the most popular beer in Maine, and it was Bud Light. So I said, I'm not drinking Bud Light, but I did. But even though it fits my criteria, minus the actual brewed in Maine part, I said, you know what though? I know what Stephen King was drinking when he wrote this damn story. So I got me a Budweiser from the 7-Eleven. I wore a disguise when I bought it. And but it's not bad. It's not as bad as I remember it. It's been a really long time since I've had this beer. It's not a bad glass. It really isn't. I gave it a really hard time. I give all the mass produced stuff a really hard time. I say it tastes like canned corn and stuff like that. But it's actually it's refreshing. I see why this is popular. It's refreshing. It's accessible. But this is the beer people point to usually when they say I don't like beer. Because this is all they know. Right. So it's like when people say, I don't like gin. You got to just try gin. You got to try a lot of them. That's how it goes. Exactly. There's a lot of different gins. There's a lot of different beers out there. So anyway, okay. So now that we got our beers, both these beers will pair very well with the story Gray Matter by Stephen King. One of my favorites. I love this story because it's just like good old-fashioned pulp. Good old-fashioned fun campfire tale horror story. Published in 1973 in Cavalier magazine. Cavalier was kind of like a Playboy knockoff back in the day. It wasn't as highbrow as Playboy was. It didn't have that reputation, but they still managed to publish some pretty decent fiction in there. There were some big names, Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov, and I was thinking that maybe it was it was probably stuff that Playboy wouldn't touch. Playboy was publishing John Updike and people like that. So, if you weren't writing inky stuff, as they say, you probably find a good market for your short horror story in Cavalier magazine. So, and he actually published quite a bit in that magazine. I think it was about 6 or 7 stories, if I recall. So this was 1973. King was still hacking away at his short stories. He wasn't yet a household name. Carrie wouldn't come out for another year. That's what put him on the map.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing having reread it again. I read it years ago a few times, but having revisited the story, hearing that it's before he ever became a name yet, he was already so good.
Oh, he was.
I mean, when you say it's kind of, pulp or whatever, but it is, but it's also some great flavor in there that's pretty advanced for that early of a writer.
Absolutely. And it even touches very slightly on a Lovecraftian theme. We'll get there in a second, but we'll get there later on, I should say. And at that time, Lovecraft even was still in the, really strange people read Lovecraft in the dark. They didn't read, nobody knew who Lovecraft was. But he did have his hold on all these modern writers that came out of that era. And so it's fun that we see that pop up here and in a lot of his early fiction, that stuff is popping up. It's pretty cool. I was just looking up his age. So, he was 26 when he wrote this, which makes me want to kill myself because I was writing fiction at 26, but it was nothing good at all. I was still doing music at the time, so I was focusing a lot on that. But Tom Lehrer, the songwriter, had a great quote. He said, by the time Mozart was my age, he'd been dead for 5 years. So he says that's the...
I like that.
Yeah, it just makes you think about how little you've done with your life when you see that. Stephen King wrote a great story when he was 26, and he had a lot of other great ones in him before he broke through. So, yeah, humbling to say the least. But anyway,
yeah, to compare yourself to anyone like him it's kind of hilarious because the guy is just made of stories and the love of making them musical. Making them flow through your whole self with this real power. Like,
yes.
He does it so often and so consistently that it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I like that you said it's musical. It's true. There is a lyricism to his word choices. We'll get into that too because there's some great ones in here. So anyway, okay, let's get on with it. So we open in Henry's Night Owl. It's a general store during a massive snowstorm, a nor'easter. And it's a bunch of rednecks hanging around talking. This is what Stephen King does better than anybody, is write rednecks talking with each other.
Yes.
Out Tarantino's Tarantino with the dialogue.
He really does.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts about this is the use of bad grammar.
Yes.
Is awesome. It puts you right inside of the room with these people.
Yes.
Because that is exactly how they would talk, We was tipped up by the stove and...
Yes.
The plows was having a hard going.
Yep.
So stuff like that just go, I know who these people are.
Exactly. They're gathered around the old Reliable. At first I thought that was a radio. I thought they were like listening to a weather report or something. But it turns out the Reliable refers to reliable stoves. There's a line of gas and oil heaters manufactured by Schneider and Trentkamp from about 1900s to the 1930s. That's what I wrote in my notes here. Cool. They were advertised as vapor stoves. If you want something that sounds really old and creaky, the word vapor does it.
That'll do it.
Every time.
That'll do it, yeah. I didn't know what that was either. I guess I assumed it was a stove.
Yeah. Huddled around the old Reliable, so I guess they just waiting out the storm, just shooting the shit with each other. These are old-timey guys. So you get a little bit of banter. And then the door busts open and a kid runs in, looking like he just kissed the wrong end of the baby.
I loved that. That was good.
And this is Richie Grenadine's kid, little Timmy Grenadine. He's our harbinger. He's going to tell us that something's wrong and our guys are going to have to do something about it. Richie Grenadine hasn't been in a while, okay? He was in some sort of accident. I guess he's been on the dole. Some
kind of work-related accident, right?
It was an accident at the sawmill. That was it. Yeah, it left him on workers' comp. Since the last he heard, Richie got awful fat. and so it's January. Nobody's seen Richie since October. But he sends his son in for his nightly case of beer. He drinks a case a night.
That's rough.
Yes. We'll find out how much he pays for it in a minute, by the way. I got a kick out of that one. So he says Richie was always a pig about his beer. What does the kid say? My dad's been on a drunk. It's another great phrase.
Exactly.
Dad's been on a drunk. But it's more than that. The kid's freaking out. Henry, who's the owner of Henry's Night Owl, says, all right, kid, come with me into the stockroom. Tell me what's going on. He invites the kid with him into the stockroom. And I was thinking that Jack Ketchum would have taken this story in a whole other direction from this point on.
Yeah.
With Henry and the little kid in the stockroom. Yeah. Henry's like, after what I just heard, we're not going to let the kid go back there. We're going to bring him in his beer. He says, I'll tell you on the way there. But he says, well, let me show you something. He shows him the money that the kid used to pay for it. $4. $4 for a case. That was in 1973. I looked it up. In today's money, that's $7. So this this is some cheap shit.
Yeah, that's pretty cheap.
I paid I think $5 and change for this tall boy Bud that I have here. So,
yeah, but that's not a Hero Supreme.
Right? No, it's not a Hero Supreme. So anyway, he's got this money. It's $4. It's all coated in gray goo. If you've ever worked retail and a girl or guy that looks like a stripper is paying for their goods and they give you crinkly, moist money, it's you know that money's just nasty to begin with.
It's so gross. So
they go out and they say, okay, let's get a case of Howard Supreme. We're gonna bring that over to Richie. So they leave two guys behind. I think it's Henry, Birdie, and our narrator. So they go out as a team, and this harkens back to your merry band of vampire hunters in Dracula. You know, when everybody goes, okay, we're gonna arm ourselves with crucifixes and stakes, and we're gonna go out. That happens in One for the Road. It happens in Salem's Lot. You know, and I'm sure he's used this elsewhere. Do they go out with Bibles and stakes and crucifixes? No, this is Stephen King's Maine. They go out with a case of beer and a hand truck. But they also have Henry's pistol.
Yeah.
What he calls a .45 caliber hog leg.
Hog leg.
Love it. And I think he also calls it a Frenchman's pecker.
Yeah, that was a lot. I was like, what? The hell's that?
So they go outside. The wind is harsh. They're going to go up the hill to Henry's house. Henry lives in a boarding house up on the top of a hill. If it's the last place the plows touch, they got to walk. And so now he's talking about...
That's a great touch, too.
Yes.
The end of town.
Right, yeah, exactly. So he's telling him the story about what happened in the Grenadine household. He says, one night, Richie sat down to polish off a case of Golden Light. As far as I know, that's another made-up beer. Yeah. Golden Light is what did it to him. He took one sip and he said, Christ Jesus, that's the worst taste I've ever had in my mouth. Now, I'm gonna break for a second. Alec, I got a question for you. What's the worst taste you've ever had in your mouth?
Oh, Jesus. I don't know.
There's so many to choose from.
That's at age 54, I've had a number of things that tasted fucking horrible, but I don't know. Okay. Let's see. If I had to guess, it would be an onion for me.
Oh, okay.
I despise them. Like,
oh, wow. Oh, okay.
Oh, my good God. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So probably like a meatloaf with onions in it, or when I first had a cigarette, probably.
All right. Mine's a little bit boring. I mean, but I always tell the story. The worst cup of coffee I ever had in my life was at this. It was like a health food store. And I can't remember why. I was like the only game in town, and I just wanted a cup of coffee, and that was the nearest place to get it. I can't remember right now, but I do remember that I took it in my car, and I was like, I can't believe how bad this is. It was the worst cup of coffee I've ever had in my life. And a couple of years later, I met a girl who worked at that store. And I said, by the way, I had the worst cup of coffee of my life there. I said, what was up with that? And she said, nobody ever came in for coffee. She said that pot was probably sitting for a day or two.
Okay, well that tracks then. That's super gross. That's really gross. So you're drinking some salmonella nightmare.
It was
some microbial disaster.
Yes, absolutely, and probably equal to Richie Grenadine's beer here.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I like this too because he said, most people were like, well, why did Richie drink the rest of it? Because he drank the rest of it.
Yeah, and that was a good point. If you've ever seen someone who's a drinker,
yes,
they'll get past it somehow. And just keep
yeah. He says, knowing Richie, he probably had most of the can in his belly before his brain could warn him.
Exactly.
So this is funny. Richie says, "I'm gonna puke. Look out!"
Yeah.
And first, it reminds me of Mr. Creosote in Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. Another Monty Python reference here. Better get a bucket. Better get a bucket. I'm going to throw up. But what makes me laugh about this line is that I had an audio version of this story, read by a guy named John Glover. He does a great job, but in this story, for some reason, he does these really cartoonish New England accents. And the way he says this line is like this: "I'm gonna puke, look out." And it's made me laugh. Thinking about
almost like some crazy JFK wannabe.
It's like JFK
voice.
meets John Wayne, I guess. I don't know, but it was like it's like the way it just made me laugh. Just picturing big fat Richie drinking that beer and going, "Christ Jesus, the worst taste ever," and then he goes, "I'm gonna puke, look out." So when I reread this, of course I heard that in my head. I was laughing.
I drank a bad beer.
Yeah.
Going to puke.
So the kid noticed, when Richie went off to throw up, Richie, his kid, Timmy, noticed that there was a little bit of that gray goo on the can. Pretty gross.
Sick.
So Richie polished off the case. God love him. A couple of days later, Timmy comes home from school and finds his dad watching the soaps. And so bad beer makes you a fan of daytime TV, we find out. So the top 3 soaps in 1973, As the World Turns, number 1. Another World, number 2. And Days of Our Lives, number 3. No one will ever say I don't do my homework.
That's pretty good.
Right?
That's pretty good. What was number 1?
Number 1 was As the World Turns.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes. So
isn't that the sands in the hourglass?
That was Days of Our Lives. I just know that because my mom used to watch that one. Yeah, my mom used to watch that. But, so Timmy's like, "You all right, Pop?" And Richie says, "I just didn't feel like going out today because, like you said, he's got the lights, the curtains drawn. He's got the lights out. He's just sitting in a chair watching the soaps, and he's starting to stink a little bit too."
Mm-hmm.
Throw some cash at the kid. He says, "Go get me my case." And when Timmy gets back, Richie's still sitting in the dark, and he's stinking pretty bad. So it goes on like this for weeks.
They start to describe it like root cellars that are old and wet.
Yes.
Fruit going south and getting furry and, just super gross smells, like the dark underground stinks of things like that. It's just awful.
It is. And he does this pretty well. This is like the theme throughout the whole thing is spoilage. Things going bad. So you can see a lot of stuff related to food. He employs all the tastes, all the senses: taste, smell, feel, sound. You get all the senses of what happens when something rots. It's pretty cool. So when he gives him the money, his hand is like a gray lump. Something's definitely happened to his old man. He's changing, and the kid's like, "What's going on?" and Richie says he doesn't know, but it feels.
He says it doesn't hurt.
He says kind of nice. It feels.
Yeah, that gives you the creepy crawlies in the guts.
Yes,
that's pretty gross.
Yeah, it's that siren song.
When I saw Hellbound, Hellraiser 2 in the theater, I don't know what you make of that movie, but there's moments in that thing that are gnarly to me, and it's not the gore part. Yeah, it's not. It's there's and I'm gonna nerd out a bit here.
That's all right.
Names and things, but Dr. Chenard is now in hell, and he's staring at the Leviathan, the big thing with the black light that shows you all your past pains and things. Okay,
right.
He's standing there and gets shoved into that gross coffin that starts to remove his blood and put in this gross gray fluid and jamming wires across his face and pulling him down into the depths, and he's gone.
Yeah. Right.
And you're just going, oh, what? And when it comes back up, he's transformed into this gray, disgusting, he's got the lines in his face from the wires. His eyes are yellowish. He's dead looking and worse than dead. But he comes out and he looks around and he just says, "And to think I hesitated." And that, when I saw, I think I was maybe 19 when I saw that, and it scared the shit out of me when he said that. I was like, oh, that's the worst thing I ever heard. I felt sick. Like, he loves that. He loves it. That's so gross.
Yeah.
It really bummed me out. It was a big moment. Yeah.
That's cool. So the kid says he's going to call the doctor on his dad, and his dad freaks out. He says, "You better not, or I'll touch you and you'll wind up like this." And he slides the blanket down from his face, and his head like a Jello mold.
Yeah, he said there was something squirming under the blanket that looked. Oh, come on, rough.
Yeah, and here's where there's a great little story here. The narrator breaks off and just gives us a little, tiny little horror story in itself. The narrator tells us about poor George Kelso, who worked for the Bangor Public Works Department. He went into a sewer to do some work, laughing and joking like he always does, and then he came out and his hair was white, and he went right down to the bar, started drinking, and didn't stop until 2 years later when he dropped dead. And he says this one guy named Frankie Haldeman got him to talk about it. And George was pretty blotto, and he turned on his stool and asked Frankie Haldeman if he'd ever seen a spider as big as a good-sized dog sitting in a web full of kitties and such, all wrapped up in silk thread. Then he says there are things, he caps this story, he says there are things in the corners of the world that would drive a man insane to look him right in the face.
That was one of my favorite lines in there.
Boom. You got Lovecraft right there. That's it.
That's the corners of the world.
Yes. That's like straight out of Lovecraft, that concept.
Sure.
Great. Good stuff.
And for those of us who are king heads, is that some sort of dial into what happened in Derry?
Could very well be. The deadlights, right?
The deadlights.
They drive you crazy to look at them.
Wow.
So now we're in cosmic horror country, which is great. I love that stuff.
Yeah,
by the way,
good.
the spider story reminds me in Dracula. And now we know King's a big fan of that book, and he references it all the time. Dr. Von Helsing is telling us about Dracula, how he survived all the years, and he says, it's so weird. He just drops in this little reference. He says, we all know about that giant spider that lived in the belfry of some cathedral, and he would descend every so often and drink up all the oil in the lamps. And it's so creepy and gross. And I have an annotated version of Dracula, and they said nobody knows where that story comes from. Bram Stoker may have just cooked that up. But that reminds me of now that thing about the spider with the kitties in the web. First of all, I'm a cat lover, and second of all,
kitty spelled Kitties, yes, not kitties.
Right. Oh,
not
I'm sorry.
Kids.
Thank you. Yes, kitty cats. Right.
Yeah.
As a cat lover,
and
that offends me, and as I was triggered. And
as a dog lover, I hate that there's a spider the size of a dog.
Okay,
That's
right.
gnarly.
Now, I'm an arachnophobe too, as King is. We know King's an arachnophobe. So this is just the 1-2 punch for me. So yes, so Richie's looking like a big old mound of gray jelly, and then told the kid to shut the light, and then Birdie says, "You know what? You better keep that pistol handy if what you're saying is true."
Yeah.
So Henry keeps telling. So this is their walk to the house. Henry's telling them this story. This is what happened, and kind of went on that way for weeks.
Yeah, he had started hanging stuff over the windows, like paper, but then it became like, I think he said rugs or something, and blankets.
Right.
So it was like a petri dish for a fungus.
Yes.
In there.
Right. Exactly.
It was becoming this environment where it's a rich environment for, like I said, fungus or any kind of gross, dark growing nightmares.
Again, it's this idea of like spoilage,
Yep.
Just environment, things growing,
and the stink is becoming unbelievable.
He has his kid heating his beer over the stove now for some reason.
Yeah, that's bad. That's so bad.
And he says, and the kid had to listen. Oh. The kid had to listen to his dad slurping it up the way an old man eats his chowder.
Oh, that is rough. See, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
yes, that's so good.
Because
it just made me so upset. It's just so gross.
You got hot beer, and then it sounds like an old man eating chowder.
Okay.
Food gone bad, things spoiling, food spoiling, juxtaposition of normal food with something gross. It's like, chowder's great. We love chowder. Okay, but
not now.
The kid comes home one day, creeps up the stairs, opens up the peephole. He calls it a Judas hole.
Yeah, that was weird. I didn't know what that was.
I think it's from the Victorian. I think it's a holdover. But it would also make a great metal band name.
Yeah.
It's a little close to Judas Priest, so I figure.
Yeah, they got the lock on the Judas part. You can't use that anymore.
Yeah.
It's a law.
So I guess. So
it's a rock law.
Judas Hole would probably be the.
It'll be the documentary of Judas Priest.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Richie is this giant, gray, slimy, disgusting thing. The kid's watching him, and what does he do?
At this point, he is now oozing around the floor like the Grinch.
The slimy
Christmas
Grinch.
trees.
Right?
Yeah,
that's
he's
right.
Sliding around the floor and I think he pulled apart a floorboard and pulled out a dead cat.
Yes.
Like all stiff and
maggots.
Gnarly maggots all over, and he eats it.
And he eats it.
Like it's a chicken leg. That was my flourish. He didn't say that, but I mean, he's eating a rigor mortis cat.
Right.
Like, what?
Yeah. And what's with all the cat murder,
Yeah, he's got a problem there.
No, seriously.
Off topic, how did you handle Pet Cemetery if you're such a cat lover?
You know what? Honestly, it doesn't bother me. I'm making jokes.
I thought you were going to say, I never read it.
No. I love that book. That book really
That's great.
Undoes me for many reasons, actually.
Sure.
It's a hard one.
It's gnarly.
Yeah. King uses this. See, this is what I love about this guy, is that he has this way of just capturing a situation that embodies true horror. In Pet Sematary, and he's referenced this before too, I think he's really proud of this. God, what's his name? I can't remember that main character, but they ask him about how he's going to pay for his son's funeral. And he said, yeah, just put it on my MasterCard, without any inflection whatsoever. And it's just chills you right to the core. This guy's going to have to be staring at that bill over and over again every month.
Right.
And just the fact that his whole kid's life just wound up there on his MasterCard like that. There's not a whiff of the supernatural in it. And it is one of the scariest, most upsetting things ever. So he's really good with stuff like that.
Yeah, one of my favorite things, just briefly, is he is the guy who writes for average people. You know, his subject matters include people that you swear you know personally.
Right.
If you're going to write about the Franklin expedition that gets lost in the Northwest Passage, you can't relate to that. You don't know, any of those people.
Exactly.
But when you're talking about a guy who's cutting his grass and gets into some sort of awful trouble, and you know that guy. And that's the gift that he gives. It's like you can really get in there quickly and feel it.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's awesome.
After that story, nobody wants to go up there, but they're like, well, we got Richie's beer, though. We might as well go up there. Richie needs his beer. So they go in that they said the house stinks worse than a cider house in summer.
Yeah.
That's one of those things. He paints that great picture of how, in the fall, the smell of a cider house is wonderful. In the summer, not so much. You got rotten apples.
He painted a great visual right then, too, when they were standing there. There was one light on in the lower hall. A mean yellow thing in a frosted glass that threw a glow as thin as buttermilk. And those stairs that went up into the shadows. So that's like paints a fantastic picture to where I'd be like, this is where I stop right here. I'm not going up there.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to go. You guys take it easy. I'm going to go.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the narrator even goes on to say, here's what the smell reminds me of. I had a dog once that crawled under the house and died. By the time I pulled it out, that's what it smelled like. And then he describes it as fly blown and putrid and just as dirty as a borin cob. Now, do you know what a borin cob might be?
No, I was gonna hit you with that question because I have no clue, and I didn't Google it.
Okay, I Googled it, and I might be sorry that I did, because I believe it refers to using a corn cob in an outhouse. And
really?
Yes.
Gross. And it's called a borin cob?
Well,
that's gnarly. That's so gross.
Yeah. So
okay,
all right. So how far are we into the story? He's already ruined. He's ruined apples, chowder, buttermilk, and now corn on the cob. These things are pure and American, and wonderful and comforting, and he's ruined them all. So
that's a lot. That's a lot.
And then
okay,
yeah.
I'm good.
So take a sip. I'm gonna take a sip too. Hang on. We're gonna refill here. Good old Budweiser.
That'd be a rough day. That's a super rough day.
It's a rough day when I'm using Budweiser to take the edge off here. All right, so borin cob.
Come on. Damn it. That's so bad.
Bon appetit. They notice, they're like, okay, this house is completely abandoned. There's no other neighbors here. Would you want to stay here? Right? No, of course not. They knock on the door. Richie answers, and he says his voice is just gross. It sounds like he's talking through a mouthful of suet, he says, where's my boy? Henry says, he's at my store having the first decent meal of his life, you pig. They hear squishing sounds coming from inside. Never a good sign. Somebody's walking towards you, and they sound squishy.
That's not good.
The Richie thing tells him, he says, open the door and push that beer through, God damn you. He says, but first you got to pull all those ring tabs. I can't do it.
I guess the part that got me was, like you said, all those gross squishing sounds behind the door.
Yeah.
But then when he spoke again, he was right there at the door.
Yes. That's right.
He was like, you
right
better
there.
open them for me. I can't do it. Gnarly.
And so now we get the dive right into horror country. The narrator puts two and two together.
Yep.
The smell, everything, and he says, wait a minute, there's been people missing from town. 2 young girls and a wino. He says, maybe that's the source of this nasty smell. Creep factor, right there.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
adds up.
Richie tells him to send in the beer or he'll come out and get it himself.
That got me. That got me. This whole interlude here, yeah.
Right. And it reminds me of like when he said, get it from me or I'll touch you. Yeah. I'll touch you with this nasty thing.
Send it in or I'll come out and get it.
Yeah.
You don't want that. Henry gestures them back, and they go. And he says, well, I guess you better, Richie, and cocked his gun.
Yep.
Now, that to me reads like a Western all of a sudden. It becomes this great stare him in the eye and don't blink and, hold your ground.
Yep.
That whole thing. It turns into a Western all of a sudden, and I love it because he's very good at that writing, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Henry is the hero of this story, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the door bursts open, and out comes Richie, and they all flee. We're done.
Yeah, they're like, no, and they bail. They're gone.
It's you have the
what did he say? He's taking 5 steps at a time down the stairs.
Yeah, something like that, right? I picture like the Looney Tunes gunshot sound effect. Right. So Henry starts blasting away as they're running away, and Henry starts blasting the thing. But the narrator tells us what they saw.
It was like a huge gray wave of jelly that looked like a man, and leaving a trail of slime behind it.
But that wasn't the worst of it. What was the worst of it, Alec?
It had eyes, but it didn't just have 2 eyes. 4 eyes and then a horrible opening underneath. What I thought initially was some kind of proboscis type thing to feed, but they realized after seeing it that this thing was about to separate and become 2 things.
Yep. Narrator says he doesn't know what was going through Birdie's head on the way back to the Night Owl, but he knows what was going through his, the multiplication table.
Yep.
2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16. And they get back to the store. And the other 2, Bill and Carl, start bombarding with questions. Neither the guy says any answers for them. Like, it's, just don't ask right now. And this is my favorite line of this story. He says, I was up to 32,768 times 2 is the end of the human race. And
so good.
Yeah. And they all just decide, all right, let's just hang around the old reliable and wait to see which one of them comes back.
Yeah, that was a solid ending. That was like, and I hope to God it's Henry.
That's right.
Or whatever he says, but yeah, let's hope it's fucking Henry.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Now look, the way I see it, that's why we're doing this at all, this podcast, because that was a short story. All of that amazing stuff.
Yes.
Was in a grand total of 9 pages or something? I mean, that's a lot of love of craft, a lot of mastery of a craft at an early age.
Absolutely.
To me, it was shocking how much I got out of that story again. I mean, I remember loving it long ago, but he did it again.
Yes.
Now.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
So it was great.
Great stuff. Waste no words. This is a gripe I have, not about Stephen King, but his imitators. There's a few times in the story where he has little asides and he's telling us a story, like the one with the spider, or he tells us a little thing about Blind Eddie, just a local character.
Yeah.
Real quick, just to set the tone, show us some character. He does that stuff really well. And when people try to imitate Stephen King, they try to do stuff like that, have these little inserts and stuff like that, and go off on tangents. It's hard to make that work if you're not really good.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're doing a Stephen King.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good stuff.
It's a great story. It's a great story.
So my Budweiser, as our listeners can tell by now, Budweiser probably goes very well with this, right? And a Founder's
Dirty Bastard. It's a Scotch-style ale.
Okay, and that goes very well with Gray Matter. So I had a lot of fun. We're going to do this again. Read another wonderful little piece of horror. We're going to pair it with a good drink.
Yeah, I'll make it a little more appropriate next time.
Hey, that's okay, man. You know, it's just like Richie Grenadine. You got to reach for what's accessible. You know, it's all right. So that's all we got.
So, yeah, man.
And we're out.